So Long and Thanks for the Fish has caused some mystification. It's nothing to do with actual fish, it's a reference to Douglas Adams, and in his Hitchhiker's books, the dolphin's farewell message to mankind as they leave the planet Earth is so long and thanks for your fish. And that's my whimsical way of basically saying goodbye, but this is me looking back and being thankful for some of the good things that happened to me, but also looking at some of the other side of life as well and trying to be as honest as I can. In 1987, from the previous video, I'd just been rejected by my pen friend Sue that I'd hoped to convert into a proper girlfriend. I was still restless to leave home in witness sort of language to move where the need is greater. I couldn't just do what I wanted. Whatever move I made had to be seen to be from God's direction. It might seem odd to some, because at the time I was living in a nice town, Fleet. We lived in a lovely big house, swimming pool, stables, garage, gravel drive. But still I was restless to move. My friend Francis had been to Ireland and wanted to go and live in Donegal. He invited me to join him. We'd be pioneer preachers out there. But that move was stopped by the circuit overseer, the Jehovah's Witness equivalent of Bishop. Then later that year I met Sue's brother Steve, and he was living in Donegal and his partner had left. He invited me out there to join him. But a little while later he decided he wanted to come back to Cornwall and be with his family. So that fell through. So it was turning into a year of dashed hopes. And then we got a call from Crawley, which had been set up by the circuit overseer, and Jim and Sylvia Bartlett invited me to go and live with them and serve in Crawley Ifield congregation where they had no pioneers, and I'd have the goal of trying to encourage pioneering. So even though it meant leaving my business in what was quite a prosperous town and serving in the sort of slightly less well-to-do place like Crawley, nonetheless I didn't hesitate because this was in quotes God's direction, and I immediately felt at home in the Bartlett house. As well as Jim and Sylvia, there was the younger daughter Hannah, who was 13. They had elder children that had moved away, and the cloud over the house was Richard, who had just been disfellowshipped. He was only a few months younger than me. Although I didn't know him, he was talked about a lot, and within the house the view was that any kind of reference to Richard was seen as an attack from Satan. So if it came back into conversation, this was seen as an attack from Satan. Now I know now how hard it was for me to leave the witnesses at 40. So what a young 20-year-old would do, having been cut off from all contact with his family and former friends and thrown into an environment he wasn't prepared for, is horrifying to think. If Jim and Sylvia worried about that privately, certainly publicly, they saw themselves as the victims rather than Richard. But I just mentioned that to give an insight really into how witnesses themselves see the situation when one to leave. I myself was very happy there. How Richard would feel about me essentially being a cuckoo in his place. I was enjoying the family life he should have had. But Jim and Sylvia were lovely to me. Jim was a Londoner. He worked on building sites as a fixer, very warm guy who always saw the good in people. I'll never remember a cross word from him all the years I was there. Sylvia was dynamic and very supportive. I know enough about myself to know now that I don't do well when I have to try and interpret people's feelings and meanings. If people are quiet or don't say anything, I tend to assume the worst because I'm having to guess. But Jim and Sylvia didn't leave me that way. They were very positive, and Sylvia did a lot to be a cheerleader for me in the congregation, so I was welcomed everywhere I went. From being alone all the time, I was suddenly surrounded by friends because Crawley was very compact. Our territory consisted of just 4 estates, and my friends were never far away. And soon friends like Tony and Robin Malcolm, Christian, Katura became part of my daily life really. And as well as preaching with them and with Hannah, we were often able to do little outings as well. Monday nights, Tony, Katura and I would get our guitars after we'd finished preaching for the evening, and we'd have a session singing and practicing around at Jim and Sylvia's. I had my electric guitar, wasn't much good at it. Tony could strum a bit, but he had a nice singing voice. Katura was very good at finger picking, but together it wasn't too bad really. And often when we went out to people's homes we were invited to perform. We could only do a few songs, so it was the same songs all the time, which must have tried some people's patience, but nonetheless it was pretty normal of a Saturday night to find myself invited out the same place as Tony and Katura, and the invitation was due to say bring your guitar. So there are some genuine Christian people there, I think, to put up with that. So looking back, that was some of the happiest times of my life, because I was really carefree. I didn't have to worry about much. Once I paid my rent money, I only had my car to look after. I worked a couple of days a week for a guy who was appalling, but I was so happy and content in the rest of my week that I could put up with him at that time. I also met some characters in the congregation. Chris, I always mentioned, was a very lovable guy, but somewhat impulsive at times. I remember one Sunday morning, I always hated Sunday morning witnessing. The people really weren't ready for us. We were waking people up, disturbing people. And we recorded in this block of about 40 flats. They were tiny studio flats, and they were arranged in a circle around a central atrium. And any noise you made could be heard in all the flats. And we pressed the entry phone button at sort of 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And if you know that loud noise that a door makes when it's about to open, well, that happened, and it didn't stop. So Chris then just went randomly pressing all the buttons on the entry phone, so boom, 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 boom. So I said to Chris, you do know what you've done now. So every single person in the flat simultaneously had their bells ringing, while we always stood there with the door buzzing like crazy. So we did what any good Christian would do in Scarpers. Another incident I remember with Chris quite well was the doors in Crawley were very close together. When I've been in ministry in Fleet, these were big houses with long gravel drives. It might take you an hour to do 20 doors. You had time to think between doors. In Crawley, the doors were so close together, you didn't really have time to think. And I'd done one door, and I'd made my intro something like, as Jehovah's Witnesses, I find people ask, why does God allow suffering? And the chap said, oh, I'm not interested in shut the door. And as we were walking away, Chris said, I don't think it's a good idea to say that we're Jehovah's Witnesses like that. But I like to get it out there and get it out of the way. But I didn't have a chance to say anything to Chris. Straight on the next door. And he got the door, and Chris said, well, we're talking to our neighbours. And the chap said, well, who are you? And Chris said, well, we're in the area talking to our neighbours. And he said, I'm not interested in religion. Chris said, well, it's not religion. So he said, who are you? And Chris said, we're Bible students, which is a name Jehovah's Witnesses abandoned about 100 years ago. And the chap finally said, are you Jehovah's Witnesses? And Chris finally said, yes. So he said, that's what I hate about you people. Why can't you just be open and honest about who you are and slam the door on us? So we walked away, and Chris said, I don't know what to say. Another character in the congregation was Tony Pelling. He would sort of disappear for months, and then when he reappeared, he'd be like a force of nature. He was a real maverick who could think for himself a bit, which meant he didn't tend to progress very far in the hierarchy of the organisation, but he was always interesting to be with. Common thing we'd get asked when preaching is, are you Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses? So when he was with Tony, he'd respond to that question, no, we're Jehovah's Witnesses, he said. We're much better than Mormons. You can still go down the pub with us, you can still have a nice cup of tea, and we don't take 10% of your salary. Another thing he did, which we certainly wouldn't get away with now, but he decided, since we were near Gatwick Airport, it would be a good idea to do undercover witnessing, as we called it, at the airport. This was totally off our own bat, but we would go up there dressed like travellers, but perhaps business travellers, still wear suits, but try not to look like witnesses. We would split up, we'd wander around on our own in the sort of departure lounge area, which was accessible then, without going through security, and if we found people sort of sat down relaxing, we'd try and strike up a conversation and try and lead it round to world events in the Bible. And because you had everything on hand, it was dry, it was warm, we had toilets, drinks, etc. We could spend all day there like that. And if we did get a good conversation going, then the other one might come along and join it. Tony thought everything through, so if we did that, we would sit the other side, the same side as the person as the witness, so that it didn't look like we were about to haul the person away. But one day I was on my own wandering around, and Tony came up to me all agitated. He said, quick, I've got one here. I think she wants a Bible study. But he said, I'm not feeling very well, I need your help. Now Tony was cleverer than me, older than me, more experienced, so it was very unusual of him to want my help, but nonetheless I trotted after him, sat down, introduced me to this lady, and he said she wants to know about the 69 weeks. But historically, Jehovah's Witnesses were very fascinated with any part of Bible prophecy that seemed to point towards dates and periods of time. And this was referring to a section of Daniel. It wasn't one I was very familiar with, but I found a passage of scripture and sort of refreshed my mind as to what it was about. And as I was about to start trying to explain it, he said, you'll have to be quick, she's going through customs in a minute. So I'm now finding myself having to give a detailed explanation off the cuff of a tricky bit of Bible prophecy in 5 minutes. So I got through it quite well, I think, and at the end she said, that was very interesting, thank you. She said, tell me, is that your S8 sticking out of your Bible? Well, an S8 was a form number that Jehovah's Witnesses used to write down people who were not home, so they could call back on them and try again. So only a Jehovah's Witness would know that. So basically they'd set me up. Part of my life at this time, of course, was Hannah, who was Jim and Sylvia's younger daughter. She was 13 when I moved in with them in 97. I was there for several years. Hannah was a lovely girl, she was very beautiful, but she wasn't vain. She was very affectionate and emotional. She absolutely loved her family and her nieces and nephews and her older brother and sister. I only had to show her a picture of a cat and she would burst into tears. Her best friend at the time was Melissa, who was also a very nice girl. I remember one day Hannah had spent the day with Melissa and Melissa had gone. And I went into the kitchen where Hannah was and just struck up a conversation about Melissa. Thankfully it wasn't anything bad, but Hannah started for no apparent reason laughing. It wasn't unlike Hannah to do that, but she was absolutely crying with laughter. She couldn't speak, and anything I said just seemed to make it worse. And it turned out Melissa was hiding in the larder, which was just next to me, so she heard everything I could say. So fortunately it wasn't anything bad. Lots of the things that we did, Hannah would come along if it was trips out, or she'd come along and sit and listen to us all practising our guitar. She was always very positive and encouraging. In 1990 I went away for 18 months, which will be the subject of another video. But when I came back, Hannah had been disfellowshipped. She was 16 at that time. Her crime would have been nothing more than falling in love. And if you don't want to carry on being a Jehovah's Witness and something like that happens, then the penalty would be disfellowshipping, and her family had nothing to do with it, just as happened to Richard when I first moved in. And that wasn't easy, but it really hit me later. About 10 years later, by this time I was married, I went back to see Jim and Sylvia and asked about Hannah, found out she was still disfellowshipped. And then it really hit me. At this point she'd got children of her own, and knowing her so well, having lived with her all those years, and knowing how emotional she was, how affectionate she was, how much she loved her family, it really hit me like a ton of bricks how much this must be hurting Hannah. And I could see the injustice, because if she hadn't got baptised, which she did at 13, she wouldn't have been disfellowshipped. Only baptised witnesses get disfellowshipped. So for a decision she took at 13, she'd be punished for the rest of her life. And if she didn't want to go back to being a Jehovah's Witness, there's no way of undoing that. And the sheer horror and injustice of that really hit me. And even though I was deeply involved with the witnesses, I left them for about 6 months. I didn't go to a meeting or take any part. I went into a depression. Eventually, about September 2001, I started going again, because I'd not moved on to anything else. And it's very hard to escape, actually. But that stayed with me ever since. Later on I became an elder, and I sat on judicial committees myself. That's where you decide if someone's going to be disfellowshipped. And the ones I was involved with, a couple of which involved, young ones, I made sure they didn't result in a verdict of disfellowshipping. And that was something I never got over, and one of the key factors really as to why I ended up rejecting Jehovah's Witnesses, because I feel that it's a practice, it's unchristian, and inhuman and positively cruel. Just a couple of weeks ago, Jim sadly died, and even though I'm so ill and it was a long way away, we thought we have to go. And part of my motivation for going is I'd still never been able to make contact with Hannah, and I'd never got her out of my mind. And Hannah was there, and Richard, who I'd never met. And you've got to think, how's Richard going to react? They're both still disfellowship. I'm basically the bloke who took his place as a young man. He could have punched me on the nose, I wouldn't have blamed him. But in fact, in that short time, we've already become friends. We've made contact with Hannah again as well. They've both grown into such nice people who they've suffered so much because of this cruel teaching of the witnesses. And that felt like a very important thing, that we've made the effort and been able to bring a certain amount of closure to a certain part of my life. Yeah. So I'm struggling to hold it together here.